Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Isaac from Guns for Everyone. Thanks for watching. Uh, I wanted to do a video about this, but I'm not ready to do it yet, so we're not going to do that. We should, however, start off on the right foot with the video and say a quick prayer to Santo Edgar. Santo Edgar, please help this video to not suck. Gracias. All right, administrative stuff right at the top. We are running our giveaway for the Vepr. If you're interested, if you donate to the legal fund under the Moat Vepr, crap, I always do that, Vepr giveaway, get a chance to win that Vepr. This is only open for 10 more days. We're closing it down at the end of May. We're going to pick a winner, and your odds of winning are pretty good. If all the tickets sold, it'd be a 1 in 2,500 chance of winning for each ticket you buy. Not even close to all the tickets are going to sell, so your odds are even better. I'd say realistically, your odds are somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 in 100? No, I can't say that. I have to go back and double check what the sales look like so far of the raffle tickets, but they're quite good. Really good chance of winning. So go check that out. As I say in all my videos, I don't give a fuck about subscribers. I don't give a fuck about likes or dislikes. I almost said dicks. But I do give a fuck about comments. This channel exists as a supplement to the concealed carry class, as a general resource for people who are considering armed self-defense. And the point of putting this information out there is to provide the information, but also improve the information. Conversation is what helps make that happen. So please, I encourage you guys to comment. The topic of the video today is protecting your stuff with deadly force, or any force, protecting your property with force. Now, in most states that I know of, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think that I am, you are permitted to defend property with force, a reasonable amount of force to protect property. And in most states, I think in all but one state, the upper limit of that is you can't use deadly force to protect property. You can't use a firearm to defend property. A firearm is a deadly weapon. If you use it to defend property in any way, generally speaking, you're going to be stepping outside the lines of what is permitted by the law. Now, what the common question is, well, what if I go out to stop a property crime and then it escalates into deadly force? Well, the argument would be that you were following the law to protect your property, and then you were forced into a position where you used a lethal tool like a firearm to protect yourself. And people are generally satisfied with that answer because they picture in their head like Billy Badass themselves being Billy Badass, going out and stopping a car thief with their bare hands and then whipping their pistol out of their boxers and then shooting the car thief after the thief threatens them in some way. We don't approach these questions from the legal perspective. I know a lot of people want the answer to the legal perspective, but that's not the right way to approach it. First of all, it doesn't matter what happens. There's always the risk that you're going to go to jail one way or another for what happened. We look at this from the perspective of, should you do this? And the question of should you do something is just a simple question of balance of risk and benefit. What are the risks if you do it? What are the benefits if you're successful at it? The risks of using violence with another person in public or in any circumstance includes the physical risk that you're not going to win that encounter, that you will lose. And there's plenty of examples to point to say that this is a plausible risk. Getting your face pounded a little bit, that might be an acceptable risk, but you don't know if the attacker has a firearm or some other lethal tool, if there's multiple bad guys who are willing to hurt you. Some of these crews that go out and steal are organized crews, and they have a plan for violence if it escalates to that. So there includes the physical risk from the minor all the way to the most severe. It includes the legal risk. Like I said, anytime you use violence, I've said in other videos, anytime you use violence, you run the risk of going to jail. I don't care how justified you think you are. I don't care what you think the law says. I don't care what your friends and neighbors and concealed carry instructors say. Using violence is always legally risky. You do not know how it's going to go once it gets into the hands of the cops, the DA, and eventually the jury. So understand that anytime you choose to use violence, even in the most severe case of self-defense, there's always a legal risk, and you can't predict the outcome of that legal risk. I've talked about this in other videos. It's probably time for an updated video, but I will cover that again in the future. There is no way ever to predict the legal outcome of a self-defense case before it happens or while it's happening. It always happens in the aftermath. There's financial risk. If you get arrested, it's expensive. If you get beat up or otherwise injured, it's expensive. What if your injury that you incur out in the driveway protecting your stuff causes you to not be able to work, causes you to lose your job? So you're like, well, that's my stuff, but now you can't even afford your stuff because you can't work. So the financial is not just a lawyer. The financial could include all kinds of negative outcomes, physically and legally, to cover the costs of your decision to use violence. So those are big picture risks. What are the benefits? Well, you could say financial. Your cars, let's just use the car as an example, because that's what most people think of when they think of protecting property, protecting their personal property on their property. And they say, well, my car is one of my most expensive possessions. And that's true. It's also probably insured. And even if it's not, losing the car is probably less expensive than losing your life, your livelihood, your ability to work, or paying for an attorney. So yeah, I understand the concept that this is a financial benefit to protect your property, but really it's not when you're balancing the potential risk of losing that one piece of property versus the financial risk of losing all kinds of other types of property. The other benefit that I think is the harder one to measure is the idea that if we continue to allow people to act lawlessly and violate us, violate our things, violate our personal property, violate our space, if we continue to allow that, then it will continue to perpetuate. The longer we live in some kind of a lawless society, the worse it gets. If I don't watch out for my neighborhood, who will? The cops are not going to be there. The cops will show up after it's over. They'll probably take a few pictures and look around and ask a few questions and never catch the person who did the thing. This one, I can't really determine this for you. When we talk about value and what you value and what you don't value, I can't determine value for you. I can't put a number on that. I can't put a value on what you value. I can barely do it for myself because I have my own thoughts about this topic, but I haven't really fleshed them out. I do know, though, that if I died in my driveway protecting some concept of law and order and left my wife and children without me around, I think I'd feel pretty stupid about that. I'm not saying everybody would. I'm just talking about myself. I don't think that I would be satisfied with that outcome. If I was sitting in a jail cell thinking to myself, well, at least the neighborhood is safe, I don't think that's a fair trade for me. Again, I can't determine value for you, but this idea that you are going to restore law and order is something you have to really think through. If you're sitting in that jail cell thinking to yourself, well, at least my kids and their new stepdad get to enjoy a safer neighborhood because of my actions, I mean, that's you. That's the way you may look at it. I don't think I'd accept that. So when it comes to thinking about your stuff, a lot of times it's a very emotional response. We talked about this, Edgar and I talked about this on the podcast a little while ago. The idea that, we evolved in an environment of scarcity. And so when you worked for something and got that thing, you probably risked your survival to get that thing. And that's hard-coded into our genetics. But now we live in a society of plenty, and your brain is still thinking of things that way. Somebody comes into your house and steals your TV, it might feel like they just stole your last meal at sort of that primal level. That's not really that helpful to you in a society where there's a lot less risk of starving to death and a lot greater risk of suffering negative effects down the road, going to jail, losing your pension, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. So what I think is the most useful thing to do in this is to just play some thought exercises out in your mind and think about, what if you heard that bump in the night and you looked out your window and you saw somebody breaking into your car? What would be the rational thing to do in that moment? Think it through as if it was happening. Think through what a rational response to that would be. And if your brain is telling you, well, that's my car, that belongs to me, think about the reasonable and rational ways to protect that car before it happens and while it's happening. Before it happens would be to make sure you're insured enough for the loss of that item. Before it happens would be make sure you have a good way of seeing your valuables without having to go outside to check on them. We talk about this in home defense, adding more visibility, whether that's cameras or other ways to improve visibility around your house. And then have a plan on how you would try to respond. For me personally, I have a window that looks out over the driveway, and I park one of my vehicles in the driveway, and if that vehicle were to be stolen, I'd have a pretty good view of it happening. And my rehearsed plan would be to get the best description possible of those people in that place. Not to go out there. I already know I'm not going out there. That car is not worth my life. That car is not worth my freedom. That car is not worth risking everything else for. So my plan is get the best description possible and be prepared to call 911. You should think these things through so that you have a reasonable, logical plan. Again, I don't determine value for you. So if your reason and logic says that I will run outside in my underwear and start a fight with a bunch of strangers, then at least think that through and how that would look. I don't recommend it, but your mind can develop a reasonable course of action ahead of time that is likely to happen once the stimulus happens. We do this in our classes: visualization of a threat, visualization of engaging with that threat, and then the aftermath, to give your brain some practice reps on how to plan around that. So that's my take on that. In the class, it's kind of hard to have this discussion because people get really emotional really quickly when it comes to this stuff. But just realize that after the emotions are over and after the dust has settled and after everything shakes out, could you look at yourself in the mirror and be satisfied with the result if you did end up losing everything that was important to you? So, all right, that's it for now. Thank you for watching. Appreciate it. I hope you guys will check out some of the other videos and go check out the fundraiser and go give yourself a chance to win a collector rifle. And I will see you next time.